Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Raham Morsi, and today we have a number of different segments. First, we start off with the world of politics, then we take a closer look at business and finance, and sometimes we have some interesting stories when it comes to the world of culture and technology. And our final segment of the show is a closer look at the world of sports. So stay tuned for all that comes and more. Let's take a break. Starting off with the political segment, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received Jordanian Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi, with the attendance of Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry and the head of the Public Intelligence Major General Abbas Kamel. Presidential spokesperson Councillor Ahmed Fahmy said the meeting tackled close relations between Egypt and Jordan. Both sides expressed relief towards the level of coordination between them, stressing the importance of continuing to boost economic relations and to increase exchange of trade, coinciding with the political ties and historical relations bonding the two sides. Visions on the peace process of the Middle East were also exchanged. Leaders of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, opened a summit in Johannesburg on Tuesday, where they weighed expanding membership as some members push to forge the bloc into a counterweight to the West. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is hosting Chinese President Xi Jinping, Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi from the August 22nd to the 24th. In recorded remarks to the summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the grouping was on course to meet aspirations of most of the world's population. Putin said they cooperate on the principle of equality, partnership support, respect for each other's interests, and this was the essence of the future-oriented strategic course for their association, a course that meets the aspiration of the main part of the world community, the so-called global majority. The Russian leader said Russia would remain a reliable food supplier for Africa and was finalizing talks on providing free grain to a group of African countries, as he promised at a summit in St. Petersburg last month. Earlier, Ramaphosa, the BRICS nations stand together in their shared objective and quest for a better and more egalitarian world. He said an expanded BRICS would represent a diverse group of nations with different political systems that share a common desire to have a more balanced global order. The leaders will hold a mini retreat and dinner where they will discuss a framework and criteria for admitting new countries and boosting the use of member states' local currencies. The theme of its 15th summit is BRICS in Africa and comes as the continent emerges as a renewed diplomatic battleground with the United States, Russia and China jostling for influence. We're delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Sharif Amir, a professor of international relations, to tell us more about the BRICS summit. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Could you tell us how did you read the remarks or the statements made by these world leaders during the BRICS summit?
Well, it started with the president of South Africa, the nation host, which has declared exactly that South Africa, as a founding member of the BRICS, does not have any objection for the widening of the membership for other countries, yes, the extension to the membership. The same thing was from Jinping, the Chinese leader. He said that China does not also object any of these plans. And then it was, of course, the awaited statement of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, yes, who was very clear about the intention of this plan of having many members other than the founding nations of the BRICS. He said today a historical declaration. He said that we are on the way to get rid of the dollar, and this has no backwards, meaning that it's done. The plan is on the table, and we're working on it. And how we will achieve it? Well, through membership of other countries. We all know that countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia, heavyweights in the Middle East, Algeria and Morocco, and North Africa, are all, and Turkey also, are all asking to be members of the BRICS.
Yes, so you believe, sir, that the names that you just gave out of these different heavyweight countries, the possibility of them joining BRICS is high, given that the member states have already shown that they are willing to approve new members?
Well, let's say that it's diplomatically being accepted, but of course, I think that there will be schedule. According to each country, what will this country bring to BRICS? Because BRICS is made of industrial countries, strong economies. As President Putin said, Russia is the fifth economy in the world. So it seems that there will be conditions also. I think that every country would have to make a contribution because there will be a currency, there will be a bank for the BRICS, there will be joint investments. It won't be something like a charity, let's say it like that. It's not asking money and asking for loans.
Yes.
For example, for Egypt, I think that we will have to accept or concentrate on the Suez Canal sector and other projects for the countries of the BRICS. So it won't be open anymore to other countries in Europe or in the US. So I think that this would be one of the conditions. BRICS is about accepting each other's contributions. So answering your question, of course there will be a big yes for everyone.
Yes.
But it will be also according to a schedule, negotiations with every country, as it happens with the EU. Negotiations with every country, what you will give us to join us. And this would be the important task.
Sir, the names that you've given out, including Saudi Arabia and Egypt, obviously, they're very big names, and they like, for instance, Egypt has long-standing relationships with each and every member country of the BRICS nations, and a large market at that as well. So the mutual trade would be very beneficial for the BRICS countries. And Saudi Arabia has oil to offer if the BRICS nations decide to move forward with discontinuing the use of the US dollar. It would be beneficial to have Saudi Arabia join the BRICS nations. Is this correct?
It will be, of course, a hard time for the Americans, because we all know that to be frank, the BRICS is heading now towards one currency, like the EU with the euro. So the aim is very clear, to get rid of the dollar. So I think that Saudi Arabia now, as it is selling oil to China out of the BRICS, but China is member of the BRICS, they're using the yuan. Yes. And I think that this would be the conditions that every country, if they will join BRICS, they have to work, or whether through their own national currency or through the BRICS United Currency, which is not yet implemented. But let me make it clear that it's very, very economic more than political. Look at the countries being accepted potentially as members. There are so many countries who have differences and they are accepted. For instance, you have Algeria and Morocco. They have different political problems, but both of them economically they need BRICS. We have Egypt and Ethiopia. We have the Renaissance Dam, which is not solved yet. Yet we could be both of us members of the BRICS. And of course, the oil production countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia in the OPEC, they have also some things to settle. So it's also about it's only economic relations. It's
mutual benefit, basically.
And I think that it will succeed.
Yes. Sir, if the BRICS nations, along with possible new members, decide to use a different currency or create their own currency, what does this actually mean for the U.S. economy? and the U.S. dollar's value?
Well, the answer is given by former President Donald Trump. It will be the historical blow-up to the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is built upon the U.S. dollar power, and today President Putin, who usually speaks very, very in a very conservative way, he doesn't play all his cards openly. Today he was very, very open, very, very confident by saying it's aimed to destroy the U.S. dollar, and we're heading towards it. It means that more than 50% of the plan has been implemented, and nobody knows exactly what took place, but he knows what took place.
Yes.
So I think that America will witness very, very hard economic times in the coming months. And this is not, I'm not optimistic about it, because we all know when the Americans feel that they're threatened in the U.S. dollar and their economic interests, they act very aggressively against all potential enemies.
Okay, Dr. Sharif Amir, Professor of International Relations, thank you so much for shedding light on the importance of the BRICS Summit. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. And back home, the National Election Authority said work is continuing to finalize the logistical preparations to hold presidential elections. The statement was made during a meeting of the authority presided by Councillor Walid Hamza to discuss the measures. In a statement, the authority said they discussed guarantees for the transparency of the election process. It said discussions also focused on decisions to be taken to secure the organization and the timeline of the election. The Arab League General Secretariat welcomed the announcement to unify Libya's central bank after a decade of division, hoping this step reflected positively on the Libyan economy and the state of living in Libyan citizens. The Arab League pointed to the importance of this announcement, an encouraging step to all proactive entities in Libya to activate the political process and go forward towards holding awaited presidential and parliamentary elections. The Central Bank of Libya has been reinstated as a unified sovereign institution almost a decade after it was split in two due to a civil war. Governor Siddiq Al-Kabir had made the announcement at the bank's headquarters in Tripoli after a meeting with the Deputy Governor, Mari Mufti Rahil, and the department heads from both Tripoli and Benghazi branches. Egypt welcomed a Libyan joint communique released in Benghazi that asserted the Libyan nationality nature of any political track or inter-Libyan dialogue. The Libyan communique was issued on Saturday by the head of the Libyan Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Menfi, the House of Representatives Speaker, Akila Saleh, and the Libyan National Army's General Commander, Khalifa Haftar. The communique called upon the head of the UN support mission to Libya to take no individual steps in regard to the political track of the Libyan crisis. A foreign ministry statement hailed the statement as that also asserted that the House of Representatives will assume its power in making necessary measures to adopt election laws referred by the 6+6 committee after it completes tasks. The ministry statement reiterated Egypt's full support to the Libyan state institutions in a drive to complete necessary steps towards holding concurrent presidential and parliamentary elections in Libya as soon as possible. We're delighted to have with us over the phone Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon to you, rather good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening, how are you?
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm good, thank you.
My pleasure.
Mr. Ambassador, could you tell us a bit about the significance of having a unified central bank? What does this actually mean for the political roadmap of Libya?
I am following this very carefully because Libya, brother country, our very close neighbor, 2 million Egyptians are living in Libya and working for it.
Yes.
If you drive your car on the desert road between Cairo and Alexandria, you will meet hundreds of cars coming or going to Libya. So we have a lot of interest there.
Yes.
And I am quite sure that our government will give whatever it takes, even our president will give whatever it takes to help our brothers, the Libyans, to come to reason. Mm-hmm. And the problem in Libya and in Syria and other Arab countries is the division between tribes and parties. Mm-hmm. And this is not good for the health of the country. Much more dangerous that each party is asking help from a foreign force,
yes,
whether it is the United States or Russia or China, France, and so on. Then, if you want to come to a solution, the solution will not be a Libyan solution. It will be affected by the role and the idea of the helping country.
Yes.
So we are in a sort of a little complicated situation in Libya. And we hope that we can carry on our efforts, yes, in order to bring them to negotiation table, to realize that one united Libya under one flag will be better for all the parties rather than the divided Libya between, yes, Tripoli and Benghazi.
Sir, do you believe that there is a possibility of finding some sort of middle ground to move forward with elections in Libya and take on the motions, I suppose, to unify the nation, as you were saying?
Yes, I think there is a lot of hope. The chances in Libya are much better than the chances in Sudan, for instance.
Yes.
Because the harmony among one Libyan and the other, or one Libyan party and the other is good.
Yes.
And the question is, we want to assure that everybody will have its share of the Libyan cake. Mm-hmm. It is a win-win situation. If we continue trying to find a solution like that within the possibility of the Libyan economy also, this will help. Something helps this problem that Libya is not a poor country. It, yes, is an oil country. They export oil. And from one side, it is helping because they don't need money or finance from foreign sources. But at the same time, it is a problem, a small problem between those who want to manage the economy of oil and those who cannot reach their share in it. So if we can reach a solution, yes, giving each party a little bit of the cake, then I will be optimistic.
Okay, Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. Scores of Israeli settlers stormed into Al-Aqsa Holy Mosque yards from the Magharaba Gate with tight security of the Israeli occupation forces. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry said Israeli occupation troops killed a Palestinian teenager near the West Bank city of Jenin on Tuesday as violence surged in the occupied territory. The Palestinian Health Ministry said the 17-year-old died after he was shot in the head by the occupation Israeli forces in clashes after an incursion in the town. Meanwhile, in the southern West Bank, troops made 44 arrests in sporadic areas in the West Bank and a clampdown of their houses and combing them. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Tuesday he had open and honest and fruitful talks with Serbian President Alexander Vučić, an open and honest talk with the president, who is visiting Athens, wrote on a messaging app under a photograph of the two leaders shaking hands. Serbia has repeatedly condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine at the United Nations and other international forums, but has not imposed sanctions on Moscow. It also maintains trade and military cooperation with its traditional Slavic and Orthodox Christian ally, while seeking to join the European Union. Former U.S. President Donald Trump plans to surrender on Thursday in Atlanta in connection with his indictment in Georgia on charges he sought to overturn his 2020 election loss in the state. He said that he's going to Atlanta on Thursday to be arrested. Trump, who is running for re-election in 2024, said on his Truth Social platform. He described the indictment as a politically motivated effort to derail his re-election campaign. CNN earlier reported that Trump planned to turn himself in at the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta. The date was set during negotiations between Trump's lawyers and the Fulton County District Attorney's Office on Monday over Trump's consent bond and release conditions, according to CNN. In a 98-page Georgia indictment revealed last week, Trump and 18 other defendants were charged with a total of 41 criminal counts in connection with efforts to reverse his defeat in the state's 2020 election. The Georgia case marked Trump's fourth indictment. He faces a New York state trial in March involving a hush money payment, and a federal trial in May in Florida for allegedly mishandling federal classified documents. Another indictment in Washington federal court accuses him of illegally seeking to overturn his 2020 election defeat. U.S. Special Counsel Jack Smith has requested a January trial, but a date has not yet been set. Trump has pleaded not guilty in all criminal cases and could spend much of next year in court, even as he campaigns to retake the White House. The World Health Organization and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are tracking a new, highly mutated lineage of the virus that causes COVID-19. Here are the details.
Six cases in 4 countries have been detected since late July, and scientists are keeping an eye on the new lineage named BA2.86 because this new one has 36 mutations that distinguish it from the currently dominant XBB 1.5 variant. So far, there's no evidence that it spreads faster or causes more serious illness than previous COVID versions. CDC said its advice on protecting yourself from COVID remained the same. COVID infections and hospitalizations have been rising in the US, Europe and Asia, with more cases in recent months attributed to the EG5 Eris subvariant, descendant of the Omicron lineage that originally emerged in November 2021. Over the past few days, public health authorities have documented 1 case each of BA286 in the United States, the UK and Israel, and 3 cases in Denmark. What do scientists say about it? They say it stems from an earlier branch of the coronavirus, so it differs from the variant targeted by current vaccines. It remains to be seen whether it will be able to outcompete other strains of the virus or have an advantage in escaping immune responses from prior infection or vaccination. But many countries have drastically reduced testing of patients and their efforts to analyze the genomes of the viruses causing new COVID cases. It, in many mutations, may radically be different in its structure. U.S. emergency department visits and hospitalizations for COVID remain low, but have been rising since early July, according to data on the CDC website. So far, however, doctors have been reporting that patients seen in recent weeks, as the Eris variant has been spreading, are not as sick as those they treated during earlier waves of the pandemic. However, it is too soon to know whether BA2.86 will cause more severe illness.
Welcome back, and joining us over the phone to tell us more about this is Dr. Hussein Khalid, the former Minister of Higher Education. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, can you tell us a bit about the variant of COVID? Why is the western part of the world worried about it? I know that the infections have risen in the past month or so, but why is it something that is worrisome for them or for the world?
Well, it's a highly mutated variant of the original virus COVID-19, especially of the subvariant of COVID-19, which was Omicron. And now the new one is called EG5 or BA286.
Yes.
And it started to propagate in US, UK, Israel, and Denmark.
Yes.
In a handful of cases. and it is highly mutated. It is propagated very quickly, and so the WHO said that started to announce its appearance in August 17, and it warned the countries to take care of this new variant.
Sir, do you believe that this new variant could be just as infectious as previous versions? Could we start to see some sort of pandemic occurring again?
Well, it could happen, but the symptoms here are different. The old variants was affecting the lower respiratory tract, but this variant affects the upper respiratory tract with running nose and the other symptoms of the usual cold. And you know, so far the vaccines that was successful in fighting the and preventing the infection of the old variants, now it is not. So the big companies that are manufacturing the old vaccines are now trying to modify the vaccines in order to start using them in the next fall.
Yes, the Director General of the World Health Organization had actually spoke earlier before these variants became problematic about the possibility of future pandemics and that the world should be prepared for this. Do you think that given what happened with COVID in 2020, the world is prepared for some sort of new pandemic?
I don't think it is going to be severe like the previous one.
Yes.
It is going to be maybe more propagated, but with mild or moderate symptoms and no big amount of severe cases. So I don't think it is going to let the people, do what they were doing in the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, Dr. Hussein Khalid, the former Minister of Higher Education, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the episode. Japan said on Tuesday it will start releasing more than 1 million metric tons of treated radioactive water from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear power plant on August 24th, putting into motion a plan that was drawn strong criticism from China. The plan, approved 2 years ago by the Japanese government as crucial to decommissioning the plant, operated by Tokyo Electric Power Company TEPCO, has also faced criticism from local fishing groups who fear reputational damage and a threat to their livelihood. The announcement comes a day after the government said it had won a degree of understanding from the fishing industry over the release of the water, even as a fishing group said it still feared the reputational damage would ruin their livelihood. France issued a red alert for southern regions amid a spell of excessively hot weather, with temperatures expected to peak at 41 degrees Celsius in the Rhone Valley. The alert, France's most serious, allows local authorities to call off sporting or cultural events and close public facilities if needed. It was the 6th time the French Meteorological Service has triggered a red alert, part of the government's program to protect the population during periods of extreme weather, and the first such incidents this year. At this stage, French hospitals were not witnessing any extremely massive rise in the number of people seeking emergency care for heat-related illnesses. Earlier on Monday, Meteo France issued an orange alert for half of the country's territory, saying temperatures will reach 35 to 38 degrees Celsius in most of the affected departments. Peaks of 41 degrees Celsius were expected in the southwest and the Rhone Valley region. Temperatures are expected to rise between 40 and 42 degrees Celsius on Tuesday afternoon in the southern departments of Ardèche, Drôme, Vaucluse and Var. Water temperature levels for cooling purposes at the Boguet plant and another reactor along the Rhone River in the southeast were also seen surpassing the government's guidance by August 24th. In the world of business and politics, moving to the top stories here with the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva saying on Tuesday that the BRICS bloc of nations aims to organize the developing global south and is not meant to rival the United States and the group of 7 wealthy economies. Here's the story.
Leaders of the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, opened a summit in Johannesburg on Tuesday where they weigh expanding membership as some members push to forge the bloc into a counterweight to the West. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is hosting Chinese President Xi Jinping, Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi from August 22nd to 24th. Brazilian President da Silva said he wanted Argentina to join the BRICS group of emerging countries as Brazil's neighbor struggles with the lack of foreign reserves. Lula criticized the IMF's loans as suffocating and hinted at the possibility of the BRICS Bank increasing lending to other countries with different criteria to stimulate their economies. Lula also said he was in favor of other countries joining the alliance, mentioning Indonesia as a potential new member. In recorded remarks to the summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the grouping was on course to meet aspirations of most of the world's population. Putin said they cooperate on the principles of equality, partnership, support, respect for each other's interests, and this was the essence of the future-oriented strategic course of their association, a course that meets the aspirations of the main part of the world community, the so-called global majority. The Russian leader said Russia would remain a reliable food supplier to Africa and was finalizing talks on providing free grain to a group of African countries as he promised at the summit in St. Petersburg last month. Earlier, Ramaphosa said the BRICS nations stand together in their shared objective and quest for a better and more egalitarian world. He said an expanded BRICS would represent a diverse group of nations with different political systems that share a common desire to have a more balanced global order. The leaders will hold a mini retreat and dinner where they will discuss a framework and criteria for admitting new countries and boosting the use of member states' local currencies. The theme of its 15th summit is BRICS and Africa and comes as the continent emerges as a renowned diplomatic battleground with the United States, Russia, and China jostling for influence.
Britain recorded a smaller than expected budget deficit in July, according to official data on Tuesday, giving Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt a bit of hope that he can cut taxes later this year before an election expected in 2024. Some economists warned, however, that the economic slowdown or a recession in the coming months as the Bank of England keeps on raising interest rates to the fight to high inflation could deny Hunt the room for maneuvers for pre-election giveaways. Net borrowing, excluding state-owned banks, stood at £4.3 billion last month, less than the median forecast of £5 billion, according to a poll. In the first 4 months of the financial year, borrowing stood at £56.6 billion. Hunt and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak have so far resisted pressure from lawmakers within the Conservative Party to cut taxes and boost their chances in the election, which opinion polls suggest they will lose. China's central bank on Monday cut a key interest rate in an attempt to counter the post-COVID growth slowdown in the world's second largest economy. Activity has been dragged down recently by uncertainty in the labor market and global economic sluggishness, weakening demand for Chinese goods. Financial troubles in the real estate sector, with several leading developers on the verge of bankruptcy and struggling to complete projects, also pose a major obstacle to growth. The People's Bank of China said in a statement that the one-year loan prime rate, which serves as a benchmark for corporate loans, has reduced from 3.5% to 3.45%. The decision is intended to encourage commercial banks to grant more loans and at more advantageous rates. Moving to the world of technology and science, Russia's first moon mission in 47 years failed when its Luna 25 spacecraft spun out of control and crashed into the moon after a problem preparing for pre-landing orbit, underscoring the post-Soviet decline of a once mighty space program. Here's the story.
Russia's state space corporation Roscosmos said it had lost contact with the craft at 11:57 GMT Saturday after a problem with it was shunted into pre-landing orbit and a soft landing had been planned for Monday. Said a special interdepartmental commission had been formed to investigate the reasons behind the loss of the Luna 25 craft, whose mission had raised hopes in Moscow that Russia was returning to the big power moon race. The failure underscored the decline of Russia's space power since the glory days of the Cold War competition, when Moscow was the first to launch a satellite to orbit the Earth, Sputnik 1, in 1957, and the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first man to travel into space in 1961. It also comes as Russia's $2 trillion economy faces its biggest external challenge for decades, the pressure of both Western sanctions and fighting the biggest land war in Europe since World War II. The moon missions are fiendishly difficult and many US and Soviet attempts have failed. Russia had not attempted a moon mission since Luna 24 in 1976, when the communist leader then ruled the Kremlin. Russia has been racing against India, whose Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft is scheduled to land on the moon's south pole this week, and more broadly against China and the US, which both have advanced lunar ambitions. Russian officials hope the Luna 25 mission would show Russia can compete with the superpowers in space despite its post-Soviet decline and vast cost of the Ukraine war. While Luna 25 went beyond the Earth's orbit, unlike the failed 2011 Phobos ground mission to one of the moons of Mars, the crash could impact Russia's moon program, which envisages several more missions over the coming years, including a possible joint effort with China.
In the world of sports, Cristiano Ronaldo gets his first taste of Asian competition on Tuesday as Al Nassr meets Shabab Al Ahli of Dubai in a Champions League preliminary round playoff, with the rest of the continent wondering if big spending Saudi Arabian clubs can be stopped. Al Nassr finished second in the domestic league last season, but since signing the five-time Ballon d'Or winner in December has added more stars this summer. Marcelo Brozovic, Sadio Mane, Alex Telles and Seko Fofana have arrived from Inter Milan, Bayern Munich, Manchester United and Lens, respectively. The club has lost its first two games of the new Saudi Professional League season, and Shabab Al Ahli may be champion of the United Arab Emirates, but Al Nassr is still seen as a strong favourite to progress to the group stages, especially as a single elimination game will take place at its Riyadh home. If Al Nassr defeats Shabab Al Ahli, it will give Saudi Arabia 4 teams in the group stage that starts in September, and they will present formidable opposition for the rest of the continent's contenders. Barcelona's United States defender Sergio Dest has joined PSV Eindhoven on loan until the end of June 2024. The Dutch club have an option to make the transfer permanent, and Barca would receive a percentage of any future sale of the player. The 22-year-old signed for Barcelona in 2020 for €21 million from Ajax Amsterdam. He made 51 league appearances for Barca in his first 2 seasons, but spent last term on loan at AC Milan. The Dutch-born American had a disappointing time at the Italian club, making just 8 Serie A appearances before returning to Spain. Dest, who played at the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, has scored 2 goals in 26 games for the US. Ahead of the draw for the US Open on Thursday, Novak Djokovic jumped to second in the men's tennis rankings after outlasting world number 1 Carlos Alcaraz to win the Cincinnati Open. Novak Djokovic said his rivalry with Carlos Alcaraz was becoming like the one he shared with Spaniard compatriot Rafa Nadal after needing nearly 4 hours to outlast the 20-year-old world number 1 in an epic Cincinnati Open final. In his last warm-up event for the season, final major, Novak Djokovic took some revenge on the 20-year-old Spaniard Carlos Alcaraz who won their final at Wimbledon on July 17th. Djokovic fell a set behind but fought back to win 5-7, 7-6, 7-6 on his fifth match point after 3 hours 49 minutes. Djokovic took second in the rankings released on Monday from Daniil Medvedev, who was eliminated in the last 16 by Alexander Zverev. The Serbian also cut Alcaraz's lead atop the rankings at 20 points. Dane Holger Rune climbed to number 4 at the expense of Greece's Stefanos Tsitsipas, who dropped 3 places. Zverev climbed 5th place to 12th. Finally, in women's tennis, Simona Halep was dropped from the U.S. Open field on Monday because of a provisional doping suspension. The U.S. Tennis Association announced that Halep, a 2-time Grand Slam champion and former world #1 ranked player, was automatically withdrawn when the tournament's qualifying draw was held. Halep's spot in the main draw for the women's single tournament in the Flushing Meadows went to Taylor Townsend. Play begins on August 28th. During a provisional suspension, a player is ineligible to compete in or attend any sanctioned events. Halep tested positive at last year's U.S. Open for the banned substance Rodac test, according to the International Tennis Integrity Agency. Halep was accused of second doping offense in May for irregularities in her athlete biological passport. Halep is a 31-year-old from Romania who first reached #1 in the WTA rankings in 2017. She won the French Open in 2018 by beating Sloane Stephens in the final and Wimbledon in 2019 by defeating Serena Williams in the title match. Well, this brings us to the end of the sports news and this edition of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.